This is Part 3, Episode 108. The Evil Eye Tyrant was about to charge ahead at full speed, but suddenly slowed in midair. A dim golden whirlpool appeared above its eye as it stopped completely in place. Mass enfeeblement, spiritual confusion. Two control-type soul skills were unleashed, completely revealing Hu Hao's immense control abilities. Although the Evil Eye Tyrant appeared to be a little confused, it seemed more callous and ferocious. Its aura soared as if it were confident of crushing Hu Hao in the next moment. The truth was that it really was that confident. While Hu Hao's spiritual attacks were strong, it could clearly sense that Hu Hao's soul power wasn't even at the level of a seven-ringed soul sage yet. Hu Hao was much too inferior compared to it. Even a transcendent Doluo would find it difficult to fight a 100,000-year Evil Eye Tyrant. No soul master was willing to face the immense spiritual power and innate soul skills of this 100,000-year soul beast. Although this Evil Eye Tyrant had only just broken through to a 100,000-year cultivation level, it possessed the purest bloodline of the Evil Eyes. It was also absolutely confident in its own abilities. While it was stunned that Hu Hao's spiritual power was in the concrete material realm, just like it was confident of crushing Hu Hao due to the huge gap between their overall abilities. One or two control-type soul skills could only temporarily restrain it. When it unleashed its full power, it was confident of easily defeating this puny human. However, it didn't know that it had made the mistake that most soul beasts made when facing human soul masters. It had underestimated its opponent. At times, a soul master's abilities couldn't be completely explained using the number of soul rings they possessed. Although this was only a rare occurrence, a soul beast would be in deep trouble if it met such a soul master. Two control-type soul skills were used on this Evil Eye Tyrant in succession, and the air in front of Hu Hao was warped and distorted. Hu Hao was interfering with this Evil Eye Tyrant's spiritual senses. This time, his interference didn't cover a large area, but just a small spot in front of him. He was using it to block the Evil Eye Tyrant's observation of him. To the Evil Eye Tyrant, Hu Hao's body seemed to contort and bend. It couldn't possibly see what Hu Hao was doing under the effect of his mass enfeeblement and spiritual confusion. However, it wasn't worried at all. It managed to regain its movement in the next second. Furthermore, it was already prepared beforehand. While Hu Hao's two control-type soul skills had managed to take effect on it, their effects wouldn't be nearly as good in the future. Its huge figure was now flying at an extremely rapid speed, and completely unobstructed since all obstacles had been destroyed by the spiritual storm earlier. As it flew, the silver patterns around its eyes started to shine brightly. Its 16 tentacles opened wide, and every tentacle was flashing with intense silver light. All living matter, including plants, immediately met with disaster once they touched his tentacles, because his tentacles could devour spirits. Once they struck something living, they could unleash a spiritual explosion that would enter an opponent's body and destroy their spiritual world. After that, it would devour his opponent's shattered spirit devoured to nourish itself. A pure-blooded Evil Eye Tyrant like itself didn't need to ingest any food. What it needed was pure spiritual power. Hu Hao looked like great nourishment to it. Right now, the look in its eye had turned from arrogance to greed. Any evil eye would be extremely delighted to see such a tonic right in front of them. A terrifying beam of silver light 3 meters wide shot out from this Evil Eye Tyrant's eye in the next moment. Evil Eye Gaze. This was one of the strongest innate offensive soul skills of an Evil Eye Tyrant, and the most frightening ability of a pure spiritual type Evil Eye Tyrant. Its effect was similar to Hu Hao's spiritual shock, its strength varying depending on the abilities of the Evil Eye Tyrant unleashing it. It was rumored that the Evil Emperor had used it on the god beast Di Qian once, causing Di Qian to stop moving for around 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, he could only passively take blows from the Evil Emperor. This memory came from Wang Qiu'er. The huge beam of silver light quickly closed on Hu Hao. The Evil Eye Tyrant was deliberately merciful and didn't unleash its full strength. It was afraid that it wouldn't be able to devour Hu Hao's spirit if he was destroyed. However, it suddenly saw an eye open when that beam of silver light was less than a meter from Hu Hao. It was a vertical eye covered in rose gold sunray patterns, and it released black and white lights. Hu Hao's rose gold soul ring shone at the same time. Not only this, but a wheel of light suddenly shone behind Hu Hao. This wheel of light seemed very weird. Although it was an illusory existence formed from light, there seemed to be patterns carved onto it. It was an image of a 3-eyed golden lion and a dancing golden dragon. The huge beam of silver light struck Hu Yuhao's body the moment that rose gold wheel of light appeared. An extremely weird scene appeared at the next moment. Hu Yuhao's body turned illusory, and the beam of silver light passed through his body. This beam of silver light lasted for several seconds before it disappeared. As it ranged out, a corridor several hundred meters long formed in the forest, surrounded by withered plants. Hu Yuhao's illusory figure turned real again, after this beam of silver light passed through his body. He wasn't hurt at all. One black and one white light shot out from his eye of destiny. The 100,000-year evil eye tyrant was shocked that Hu Yuhao was able to survive its evil eye gaze without being harmed at all, and was struck by these two streaks of light. It felt slightly dizzy before it returned to normal. It seemed as if nothing had happened at all. However, Hu Yuhao could see that its eye was no longer silver. It was now black and white. The world that Hu Yuhao saw was different from the world that this evil eye tyrant saw. In his eyes, he initially saw countless threads of destiny around this evil eye tyrant. However, they had been snapped at this moment. Not only this, but this evil eye tyrant was also weakening at a shocking speed. It wasn't just its soul power that was weakening, but its spiritual power, too. Hu Yuhao's eye of destiny turned back to rose gold, and a layer of distorted, rose gold ripples started to spread from Hu Yuhao's eye of destiny. When this strange layer of rose gold ripples appeared, everything around them turned rose gold too. On close observation, even the dust drifting in the air paused as the rose gold ripples passed over it. This evil eye tyrant was extremely sensitive and felt that something was amiss. Subconsciously, it tried to use its spiritual power to unleash its soul skills. However, it discovered that it couldn't do anything, and couldn't even move its body. It was like its spiritual power had been frozen. The most terrifying thing was that it finally discovered that there was something wrong with its body. It could sense the black and white aura on it. Ah! It let out a tragic scream and struggled. It wanted to break free from the mounting fear seizing it. It managed to succeed, as the two soul skills that Hu Yuhao used on it could only hold it in place for a second each. When combined, they could still only restrain it for 3 seconds. Changing his attack, Hu Yuhao also circulated his soul power. His rose gold ripples weren't released rapidly. They only managed to reach the evil eye tyrant after the 3 seconds were over. The moment it regained control of its body, the evil eye tyrant tried to retreat without any hesitation. However, it discovered that it was moving at a pathetic speed, like its entire body had deteriorated. It was even more horror-stricken that there was an additional piece of granite on the ground right now. A piece of granite that seemed to have miraculously survived his clashes with Hu Yuhao earlier. This piece of granite wasn't very large, but it still ran into it as he tried to avoid Hu Yuhao's attack. Even though it immediately crushed the stone to pieces, its body still stopped without any control. It was also at this instant that the rose gold ripples reached its body. Its body immediately froze, and there was now another layer of rose gold on it. Hu Yuhao was adding more colors to its body as they fought, and managed to succeed in doing so each time. The rose gold ripples spread another several hundred meters before they stopped. Within this region that now spanned 500 meters in diameter, a rose gold ocean drifting in the air seemed to appear, with Hu Yuhao at its center. The sky above the evil demon forest suddenly turned gloomy. However, the dark clouds reflected golden light amidst this gloominess. Spiritual blast! Hu Yuhao shouted coldly. The rose gold ripples started to shake, but they were very gentle and didn't cause any destruction. Even the parts of the forest that were further away and affected by it didn't suffer at all. However, wrinkles started to appear on the evil eye tyrant's eye when this tremor reached it. After that, its body started to shake tremendously. A series of weird noises sounded, somewhere between popping and blowing. Holes burst open on the evil eye tyrant's body, and silver gases flowed from those wounds. It was like a huge balloon had just popped open in several places at once. All this time, the evil eye tyrant's eye was filled with disbelief. It couldn't believe that its opponent's spiritual power could hurt it even though it had a higher cultivation. This was completely unbelievable. Hu Yuhao rubbed his forehead with his hand. The sunray patterns around his eye of destiny flared with light, and a streak of rose gold light shot out. This streak of light seemed like it came from another world. It disappeared the moment it shot out from Hu Yuhao's eye of destiny. When it appeared again, it was directly in front of the evil eye tyrant. Bloody silver light splattered on the ground. The streak of rose gold light had pierced through the evil eye tyrant's eye, and only left remnants on the outside. The Evil Eye Tyrant's body was shaking uncontrollably now. Although its silver blood stopped splattering, it was still flowing out uncontrollably from the wounds on the Evil Eye Tyrant. Even at this stage, Hu Yuhao didn't dare to let down his guard. This was his first time facing a 100,000-year soul beast. Lights shone brightly on his back, and soul thrusters propelled him forward. In an instant, he traveled several hundred meters and arrived in front of the Evil Eye Tyrant. The cold look in his eyes turned gentle, and they were now filled with a look of remembrance. He clenched his right fist at his waist, and all the light in heaven and earth seemed to gather towards his fist. His eyes, including his vertical eye, were shining brightly at this moment. A strong spiritual undulation caused countless thin slits to appear in the surrounding space. The fist of remembrance, a fist which contained a surging feeling of remembrance. Hu Yuhao's fist struck empty space, and a huge beam of golden light hit the Evil Eye Tyrant's body. The countless spatial slits started to take effect on its body. They combined with Hu Yuhao's soul and spiritual power, causing another blast to occur. A huge wound more than a meter long appeared on the Evil Eye Tyrant's eye. It had been directly pierced through. The spiritual suppression that the Evil Eye Tyrant had unleashed around its body stopped, and its 16 tentacles all froze in midair. Hu Yuhao trembled, but he quickly managed to stabilize himself. A streak of golden light flew back from this huge wound in the Evil Eye Tyrant's eye and landed in his hand. It was the golden dragon spear, which had belonged to Wang Chua. Immense life energy was surging towards Hu Yuhao through the spear. The part of the spear that was drawn out of the Evil Eye Tyrant was carrying a silver glow, as it continued to draw out the life energy of the Evil Eye Tyrant and nourish him. The color on Hu Yuhao's pale face was slowly returning to normal. However, he thought of something, and quickly took a step forward. He grabbed the spear with his left hand and waved his right hand. His dark golden terror claws appeared and clawed out at a streak of silver light that was about to rise and escape. It was a silver crystal body, and there were extremely dense spiritual undulations inside it. Hu Yuhao's dark golden terror claw was incredibly sharp, but even it couldn't break this crystal open. That flourishing and immense spiritual power was instantly withdrawn as the silver crystal shone and flickered. So hard. Hu Yuhao raised his golden dragon spear with his left hand and poked at the silver crystal, but even the spear did nothing to it. The silver crystal had a powerful spiritual barrier protecting it. Since that's the case, my life guardian blade that's good at consuming life energy probably can't do anything to it, either. However, if your spiritual origin is hidden inside, do you really think there's nothing I can do to you? Hu Yuhao wasn't trying to ruthlessly exterminate this Evil Eye Tyrant. The Evil Eye Tyrant's body had been killed, but since a soul ring didn't appear, it meant the soul beast wasn't truly dead. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao really needed his seventh soul ring. His adversary was the one who had chased him down and attacked him first, and thus he didn't feel his actions were inappropriate at all. It was possible that no one else in this world was as handy as Hu Yuhao when it came to dealing with spirits. Unfathomable incantations were voiced as a swathe of clean white flames gradually took form in front of him. This small ball of fire had almost no warmth at all, but it gradually became material. The silver crystal, which wasn't afraid of Hu Yuhao's dark golden terror claw, or his golden dragon spear before this, began to flicker vigorously after this white flame appeared. The Evil Eye Tyrant's flustered and exasperated voice rang out. "You're dead if you dare to kill me. My father will avenge me, he will avenge me. If you let me go, I can guarantee you safe passage out of here. No, don't do it." Hu Yuhao seemed like he couldn't hear its voice at all. His dark golden terror claw held the silver crystal down, and the small cluster of white flames drifted onto the silver crystal just like that. The silver-white crystal was so hard and tough, but sharp and shrill agonizing cries could be heard when this utterly unassuming white flame touched it. The tough silver crystal began to break apart like melting ice and snow, and silvery air streams could be seen emerging from within. However, none of it could escape the white flame, and every single wisp was absorbed and incinerated. These were purifying flames, and this fire was specifically designed to purify spirits. Spirits would rise into the air after death, and if they didn't dissipate by themselves, they were likely to become vengeful spirits. These purifying flames were the perfect medicine against vengeful spirits, and such spirits would be absolutely countered by purifying flames, no matter what rank they were. Hu Yuhao was probably the only person across the entire Doluo continent who could release purifying flames directly. Furthermore, he could only channel purifying flames within such a short period of time, after his spiritual power was raised to the concrete material realm. A blood-red soul ring was finally released after the silver crystal melted completely. Hu Yuhao was momentarily stunned as he stared at this soul ring's light, and subsequently pursed his lips tightly. He wasn't in a hurry to absorb this soul ring. Instead, he used his golden dragon spear to search the evil eye tyrant's carcass, and he quickly found a small and delicate silver skull. Just as the Sky Dream Iceworm and the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion said, evil eye tyrants almost always produce skull bones if they produced one, because the soul beast's whole body was basically just a head. Just as Hu Yuhao was preparing to put this skull bone away, and bring it back to his companions, the Eye of Destiny on his forehead suddenly lit up. A rose gold beam of light burst out and landed on the silver skull. The silver skull was immediately covered with rose golden hues before it flew towards Hu Yuhao's Eye of Destiny. The skull shrank rapidly as it was drawn through the air. This is... Hu Yuhao felt a dash of coldness in between his eyebrows as a rich and powerful wave of spiritual power flooded into his spiritual sea. In the next moment, this wave of spiritual power was cocooned by another even more domineering and overbearing existence. And after that, the sensations just stopped. Hu Yuhao's facial expression instantly became a little strange. The sensation he had just felt made him feel as though his Eye of Destiny had gobbled up the evil eye tyrant's skull. No, it wasn't gobbled up by my Eye of Destiny. It should have been eaten by Chioa's three-eyed golden lion skull bone, right? Hu Yuhao suddenly recalled his impression when he had first met Wang Chioa, back when she was still the three-eyed golden lion. Back then, she seemed to consume other soul beasts' brains as food. So did the skull bone that originate from her also eat other skull bones? What was going to happen after it ate them? Did this mean that part of Chioa's consciousness remained? When Hu Yuhao realized that some remnant of Wang Chioa's consciousness might still remain, his heart began to heat up. However, he had yet to feel his skull bone when the Sky Dream Iceworm's voice rang out in his mind. We can't stay here for long. Absorb the soul ring and leave. Yes. He was deep in the evil demon forest, and there was nobody around to protect him. He couldn't stay here for long. Hu Yuhao flipped his right wrist as he thought until this point, and a small, delicate soul tool appeared in his hands. This soul tool was blood red, and looked like it was sculpted and engraved from a special crystal body. There were countless sophisticated patterns on it. Hu Yuhao pressed on the soul tool's surface, and the entire spherical soul tool lit up as circle after circle of red light expanded outward. These circles quickly touched the blood-red soul ring hovering in midair. Those red waves acted like they had instantly found a target, and wrapped themselves around the soul ring. Strangely, the blood-red soul ring was formless and had no substance, but it was actually pulled down by those red waves, and was quickly absorbed into that small, delicate soul tool. It's so useful. Teacher Xian is truly a genius amongst geniuses. Hu Yuhao exclaimed in admiration inside, before he leapt into the air and soared into the distance. The soul tool that he had just used was called a soul ring storage tool. It wasn't very big, and was made from only the rarest metals. Xian Zuan had expressly crafted this soul tool for Hu Yuhao after he brought all those rare metals back from Radiant City. This soul tool was class 8. It could use certain special undulations from its constituent metals under guidance from its formation arrays to temporarily store soul rings. It could store a maximum of 9 soul rings at once, and these soul rings could be maintained and stored for 1 week. This soul tool was far too expensive to craft en masse, a product of Xian Zuan's research. Back then, Xian Zuan had used this research product to become the illustrious Virtue Hall's chief researcher. It was a pity that the materials that this soul tool needed were excessively expensive. Crafting this soul tool was also very difficult, because it was a class 8 soul tool. It was practical and useful, but its usefulness was still a far cry from how expensive crafting this soul tool was to many people. Xian Zuan was recognized for his research, but his research product wasn't promoted or popularized within the Sun Moon Empire. Practically speaking, it couldn't be promoted at all. Hu Yuhao was finally starting to relax as he flew away. Suddenly, an indescribably frightening sense of danger gradually rose from behind him. A forceful and bold voice filled with seething rage seemed to echo from every corner of the evil demon forest. Who? Who killed my son? Who was it? This voice was purely projected as thought via spiritual power, and both humans and soul beasts could clearly feel the indignation, along with the voice's unrivaled and terrifying spiritual power. More than a third of the evil demon forest began to twist and contort, although the plants weren't hurt or damaged. Countless soul beasts clutched their heads in agony in this moment, and crumpled to the ground. Hui Yuhao's body slowed conspicuously, and his heart filled with fear. Hui Yuhao hadn't thought too much when he heard the Evil Eye Tyrant claim that its father would take revenge for it, and had believed that the Evil Eye Tyrant was just trying to threaten him. A defeated 100,000-year soul beast calling for its father, that was simply too laughable. However, after he had calmed down from the fight, and with that furious howl, he suddenly realized something. There could be someone in the evil demon forest who could be 100,000-year soul beast's father, who could have been this Evil Eye Tyrant's father. With that entity's age and cultivation rank, didn't it fit the bill? Hui Yuhao was actually very lucky. In terms of obtaining soul rings, no other soul beast was more suitable for him than the one he had just used all his strength to kill. However, his luck was so good that it was unbelievable. The soul beast he had just killed was the youngest son of the evil demon forest's true dictator, the Sun Moon Empire's #1 savage beast, and the entire continent's #2 savage beast, the Evil Eye Tyrant King, who was also known as the Evil Emperor. Even though Hui Yuhao had intercepted that 100,000-year Evil Eye Tyrant's spiritual origin, the Evil Emperor's terrifying spiritual power allowed him to maintain spiritual connections with every single one of its children. The Evil Eye Tyrant's spiritual origin was naturally obliterated after Hui Yuhao killed it, and even though the Evil Emperor was in a deep slumber, how could it not be startled awake when one of its children's auras suddenly vanished? It was the reason the Evil Emperor had exclaimed so furiously. Hui Yuhao's scalp began to go numb, and his hair started bristling when he guessed who that horrifying voice belonged to. He didn't dare to hold back anymore, and activated everything he had as he flew forward with all his might. At this moment, many soul beasts were frightened by the Evil Emperor's ferocious roar, and few soul beasts came forward to intercept him. Hui Yuhao's heart was a little twisted. He didn't know why his luck in recent days was so terrible. Even after Chio's auspicious sacrifice, this fact didn't change. However, now was obviously not the time for complaints and resentment. Hui Yuhao continued flying with every ounce of his strength, as he unleashed all of his spiritual power. He activated imitation and spiritual interference to their highest possible levels to mask himself. His fervent hope was that the Evil Emperor's awakening required a process, and that it couldn't lock onto him as soon as it woke up. What happened proved that his thoughts were wonderful, but reality was cruel. An enormous red pillar surged into the sky in the deepest regions of the evil demon forest. That red pillar was more than 100 meters in diameter, and even people outside the evil demon forest could see it clearly. The pillar surged several thousand meters into the sky, and the clouds swiftly gathered towards it. The enormous pillar broke through the clouds and tainted everything around it a blood-red color. The clouds gradually dispersed, revealing a colossal blood-red eye. This blood-red eye hung thousands of meters in the sky as it looked down on the evil demon forest, and the forceful voice from before rang out once more. "Child, my child, where are you?" This exclamation contained exceptionally strange and sinister spiritual undulations. These undulations descended onto the forest from thousands of meters up in the sky and expanded outward, with the evil demon forest's core region as the epicenter. The spiritual undulations covered an ever larger area of effect, almost 2/3 of the entire evil demon forest. Hui Yuhao was running away with incredible speed, but he was still far from escaping its area of effect. When those strange spiritual undulations landed on his body, he felt the soul ring storage tool hidden on his body warm up. Shit! Hui Yuhao immediately understood that he was in trouble. The Evil Eye Tyrant King couldn't instantly find the location where his son had died, but he was using this exclamation charged with spiritual undulations to find the 100,000-year Evil Eye Tyrant's spiritual undulations. Hui Yuhao had purified that Evil Eye Tyrant's spirit, but the soul ring that it had left behind still contained some of its spiritual undulations. Hui Yuhao almost didn't have any time to plan, or to think of anything, as the Eye of Destiny between his eyebrows lit up. The wheel of light behind his head that had formed when he faced off against the 100,000-year Evil Eye Tyrant glimmered once more. In the next moment, the colossal blood-red eye in the sky seemed to refract as a blood-red pillar 100 meters across refracted downwards from several thousand meters in the sky. Things like the sun-moon divine needle were just a small toy compared to this horrifying red pillar of light. Boom, boom, boom. Somewhere in the evil demon forest, or rather at Hui Yuhao's location, a humongous mushroom cloud surged into the sky. Anybody looking down from the sky could see that a region of the spacious evil demon forest had been washed entirely blood-red. Afterwards, the lush green in that region melted away just like that. This region was at least 1,000 meters in diameter, and not a single inch of vegetation remained. The red colors in the sky gradually faded away, and the blood-red light receded and fell back into the evil demon forest's core regions. A dense and grievous will traveled out from that place as powerful emotional ripples blanketed the entire forest, and countless soul beasts cried out and teared up as a result. The area that was just bombarded by that terrifying red light began to lose all those red hues, and not a single soul beast would dare to enter that region for a month. The forest wasn't the only thing obliterated by that horrifying spiritual power. The earth had sunk down by several dozen meters, as if the very stones and soil had been stripped of life. However, in the middle of this region, that was temporarily considered forbidden ground, a wave of intense coughing sounds could be heard. A battered and wretched figure slowly stood up. His entire body was covered with a layer of dirt, and his appearance was completely obscured, while his clothes were conspicuously torn and tattered, but he was alive. He sighed at his own luck. "I'm still alive." Hu Yuhao's face twitched as intense dizziness struck his head. He had formidable spiritual power, but he currently felt as if his entire spiritual sea had been sucked dry. His body was soft and weak, and he struggled to even continue standing up straight. His entire body was in a bad state. Yes, he was still alive after taking a hit from the evil emperor, who had 800,000 years of cultivation. How unimaginable was this? The evil emperor, who had just unleashed that attack, had no reason to expect that this human was still alive. When he had discovered Hu Yuhao with his spiritual detection, he could already tell how strong he was. From the evil emperor's perspective, this attack was enough to obliterate Hu Yuhao from the face of the earth. The evil emperor's arrogance meant he couldn't be bothered to check the aftermath. Furthermore, he was in the most crucial time of his closed-door cultivation, so he didn't have the time and energy to investigate. The Sky Dream Iceworm's hopeful words from back then clearly didn't come true. The evil emperor wasn't far from the limit, but he wasn't there, after all, and he was still alive. He was the continent's second strongest savage beast as long as he was still alive, and one of the most frightening existences on the continent. "It feels great to be alive." Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh inside. "You've saved me yet again, Choa." The reason why he was still alive naturally wasn't because he had enough strength to withstand that all-out attack from the evil eye tyrant king. How could the evil emperor's spiritual sweep have any judgmental errors? The reason why he was alive was because of the skull bone that he had obtained from Wang Choa, the auspicious beast's skull bone. The auspicious beast's skull bone possessed a special ability, besides bestowing two powerful soul skills upon Hu Yuhao. This ability was called spiritual immunity. Hu Yuhao could make himself immune to all kinds and levels of spiritual attacks 3 times a day. Unless Hu Yuhao was faced with a god who had the ability to change destiny, Hu Yuhao could render himself immune to all sorts and levels of spiritual attacks. Hu Yuhao had relied on this ability, which was basically against natural law in the spiritual realm, to challenge the 100,000-year evil eye tyrant. He had used this ability to gain the advantage against his adversary in a perilous battle, and had eventually managed to kill it. Hu Yuhao could use spiritual immunity 3 times, when he was in peak condition. After using this ability once, he would have to replenish his skull bone with spiritual power through his own cultivation. Of course, he could use another method to replenish his skull bone. He could consume other skull bones, just like how he had consumed the 100,000-year evil eye tyrant's skull bone. Hu Yuhao would need at least a month to fully replenish his skull bone to 3 instances of spiritual immunity, if he didn't consume any skull bones. Spiritual immunity didn't seem like much when one considered that 1 month was a very long time. But in reality, this ability was very useful to Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao had had to use spiritual immunity to defend himself against a spiritual type attack at his level of spiritual power. So just how powerful did that attack have to be? Everything that had just happened proved this point. No matter how powerful the evil emperor was, spiritual immunity had still protected Hu Yuhao from its attack. However, Hu Yuhao also had sufficient experience through this attack that not everything was absolute. The evil emperor's attack didn't kill him, but his spiritual sea was immediately sucked dry in that instant, and even his skull bone was sucked dry. Hu Yuhao felt very fortunate that his auspicious beast's skull bone had consumed the evil eye tyrant's skull bone before this. The spiritual power from consuming that skull bone was currently replenishing him slowly. Otherwise, he would have fainted, and he had no idea how long it would have taken him to wake up if that happened. "I have to leave this place as quickly as possible. I must." Otherwise, if the evil emperor dusts its hands and comes down to take a look, I'm dead. Hui Yuhao would have trouble fighting even a single 1,000-year soul beast in his current state, let alone the strongest individual among all the evil eye tyrants. Hui Yuhao bit down on the tip of his tongue. An intense pain reinvigorated his spirit and pumped adrenaline into his system. He quickly checked his soul ring storage tool. That thing was worthy of being a Class 8 soul tool, and wasn't destroyed while under the protection of Hui Yuhao's spiritual immunity. The 100,000-year soul ring that was contained inside was also intact. At least he didn't take that attack for nothing. Hui Yuhao retrieved a small bracelet from his storage ring and put it on his wrist. Afterwards, he began to activate this bracelet with his soul power. He had consumed too much spiritual power, but his soul power's situation was relatively good. The silver bracelet swiftly shone, with a layer of gentle silver light, as Hui Yuhao infused soul power into it, and this silver light wrapped backwards and stretched up along his wrist. The silver light quickly formed a silver bracer cocooning his left arm. Rows of silver light shone from his bracer, and ray after ray of silver light flickered as metal pieces covered by that silver light hovered in front of Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao took a deep breath and released his soul power to produce vigorous kinetic forces, and attached those rays of silver light to his body. The silver lights rapidly covered his body, and it didn't take long before his entire body was covered by a human-shaped soul tool. This human-shaped soul tool was a lot prettier and more elegant than the one that he had crafted in the tournament not too long ago. This set was streamlined all over, and very simplistic and generous. A pair of wings arched behind his back, and quickly became 3 layers of golden wings, as he infused soul power into them. Every layer of golden wings had 6 blasting holes, the higher wings narrower than the ones below. Every other part was matched to Hui Yuhao's frame, every component intricately and finely assembled. Hui Yuhao only looked a little bigger after donning the suit, and there were no redundancies at all. This was the human-shaped soul tool that Xian Ziwen had personally crafted for Hui Yuhao. Xian Ziwen had considered that Hui Yuhao was still a soul king back then, and so had done all he could with this soul tool to ensure that it could maintain its strength as a Class 7 soul tool, and that Hui Yuhao could still use it as a soul king. Hui Yuhao didn't have time to wear this suit when he faced off against the Holy Ghost Church's powerful individuals, because everything had happened too suddenly. So this was the first time he had used it. In truth, there wasn't any practical use to wearing this suit against those evil titled Doluo. However, his situation was very different at the moment. With this soul tool, he could use the 12 miniature compressed sealed milk bottles attached to it to sustain himself for another round of high-intensity combat. With this suit, Hui Yuhao would have no problems protecting his life even if he encountered another 100,000-year soul beast. At the same time, he could use this suit to get out of the forest as quickly as possible. Hui Yuhao didn't fly into the sky, because he was still inside the evil demon forest. He activated the soul thrusters on his back and propelled himself forward at breakneck speed. His goal now was to leave the evil demon forest as quickly as possible, and then find somewhere safe, so that he could absorb his 7th soul ring, the one from that 100,000-year evil-eye tyrant, and become a soul sage. A dull slap could heard as Bei Bei stood up with a grave and gloomy look on his face. Shu Sansha, He Kai-tu, Yi Gai, Jing Ziyan, and Ji Juechen sat on both sides of the table, along with Xiao Xiao, Jiang Nannan, Nana, and Mo Xian. Besides Xian Ziwen and Jiao Delu, almost all of the Tang sect's inner circle was here. 3 days. You guys have been back for 3 days, and we still haven't heard anything from our little junior brother. In terms of time, he should have returned before you with his flying-type soul tool, whether he traveled across the ocean or land. But so many days have gone by, and where is he? Who can tell me where he is? Bei Bei's voice became higher, and anger that was seldom seen on him filled his scholarly face. Shu Sansha and the others had successfully returned with the hostages, and came back to the Tang sect a few days ago. However, their elation and joy from successfully accomplishing their mission quickly dampened as they discovered that Hui Yuhao hadn't returned, and they hadn't heard a single thing from him. Bei Bei had received all their reports, and then consoled them before he went to Shrek Academy with a gloomy face. 3 days had gone by, and nobody from either the Tang sect or Shrek Academy had heard anything from or about Hui Yuhao. For the Tang sect, every single hostage added together wasn't as important as Hui Yuhao. This was the same for Shrek Academy, too. What was even more disadvantageous for them was that the Sun Moon Empire had increased their monitoring and surveillance of the Doluo continent's 3 native empires exponentially, as well as on Shrek Academy, which had rescued the hostages, and continued to send army after army towards their borders. The Star Luo Empire and the Heavenly Soul Empire did the same. Their hostages had been saved, and the Sun Moon Empire hadn't recovered their strength. This was the best opportunity for these two empires to deal a heavy blow to the Sun Moon Empire, and neither empire was stupid. What were they waiting for, if not for this chance to weaken their enemy? The Doling Empire was positioned behind the other two empires, but their survival was closely related to the other two. The Doling Empire had already deployed a huge army with 7 titled Doluor towards their borders, and a great war could break out within a short period of time. Under such circumstances, both Shrek Academy and the Tang sect would have an exceptionally difficult time if they wanted to send someone into the Sun Moon Empire to search for Hu Yuhao. Therefore, they could only choose to wait for now. They had waited for 3 days, and those days had gone by without any news of Hu Yuhao. Starting from the time Shusansha and the others had separated from Hu Yuhao, 8 full days had gone by, and the rage that Bei Bei had been suppressing in his heart finally erupted uncontrollably. Bei Bei didn't mention it explicitly, but everyone understood that Hu Yuhao's decision to return to Sunrise City so that he could help Nan Qiuqiu save Nan Shuishui wasn't a wise one. However, the mission was empathic and righteous. Could they blame Hu Yuhao? No, because everyone else would have done the same if they had been in his shoes. Shusansha forced a laugh and said, "If only I had stayed behind then." Hikaitu said, "How could you have stayed back? Our plans outside required you to transport us over long distances, and who could have taken over for you?" Yu Hao's decision was right. He is adept at concealing himself, and he was the least likely to run into trouble by staying behind amongst all of us. We have to trust him, and trust that no danger will happen to him. Eldest senior brother, don't be too impatient and flustered. Being flustered will accomplish nothing, because we can only continue waiting. The borders have been locked down so tightly, so it's normal that little junior brother is taking a little longer to return. Bei Bei's expression settled down a little, and he returned to his seat. "I'm sorry. I haven't been in the right state of mind over the past few days. Actually, I should be the one to blame for this matter. I should have been the one following him. Little junior brother has been through so much hardship recently, and Dorma is still in a deep slumber. I'm really afraid that something's happened to him. If something does happen to him, how do we explain it to Dorma after she wakes up? The academy is even more worried than I am, and Elder Xian sends people almost every day to inquire if Yu Hao has returned. Yu Hao is younger than us, but has always been so steady, no matter what he does. He naturally understands that we worry about him, and he will return as quickly as possible if he's all right. The tight surveillance soul tools of all kinds on the borders would spell great trouble for us, but he possesses formidable spiritual power, and is by himself. I'm sure it won't be difficult for him to hide and make it back discreetly. Therefore, even though I'm not willing to admit this, I can be almost 100% sure that he's run into some kind of trouble. I just don't know whether he's run into a big problem, or a small one." Shusansha said, "Sister Xiaodao is in Sunrise City too, and she has regained her mind and her consciousness with Yu Hao's help. She has 8 soul rings, and her element is as close as it gets to ultimate fire. Yu Hao should have a chance to escape with her help even if he's caught by evil soul masters. Let's wait for another 2 days, and if we still have no news about him, we will invite the academy to come out. No matter what, we have to find some way to infiltrate the Sun Moon Empire to search for him." Bei Bei nodded and said, "That's all we can do." Boom, boom, boom. A thunderous boom rang out right at this moment. This deafening boom startled the Tang sect's members, even though they were inside a conference room. Hikaitao glanced out of the window confusedly and muttered, "Such loud thunder. Why is the sky getting dark?" It was still morning, but everyone could see that the sky outside the conference room's window was darkening at an alarming rate, to the point where the conference room also darkened. "Let's take a look outside." Bei Bei got to his feet and swiftly stepped outside, and everyone else followed behind him. Everyone walked out, and their expressions grew solemn. Their judgment from inside the conference room was right. The sky was getting dark, and it was getting dark really quickly. However, there was an abnormal feeling about this phenomenon. If the weather were changing, dark clouds would roll over the skies, winds would blow, and they would gradually appear randomly. The sky would become gloomy and darken as a whole. However, what they could see were neat black colors far beyond the horizon, and this black mass was swiftly spreading towards Shrek City, as if an enormous army were invading them. This scene seemed as if there was a curtain in the sky that was slowly being pulled up, and causing the entire world to go dark. Something is wrong. Kaitu, quickly informed teacher Xian. Sansha, you will immediately head to the academy to ask about what's happening. Nan Nan, Xiao Xiao, you two will proceed to the top of the city wall, and relay any information as quickly as possible. Use flying-type soul tools to travel there and back. Quickly gather the Tang sect's other members, and get everyone to prepare for any unforeseen circumstances. Bei Bei seemed especially calm, and swiftly delegated duties to everyone. The Tang sect's members began to move immediately. However, Shu Sansha had just gotten off his feet, when a dense voice boomed across the entire city. Every disciple from Shrek Academy's inner courtyard, assemble at the southern city wall. This voice was all too familiar to the Tang sect. It came from Elder Xian. A jade-green flare surged into the sky at the same time, exploding high in the sky and transforming into an exclusive avatar of Shrek as green light permeated the heavens. It was very eye-catching. Many of the people here were from Shrek Academy, and their expressions immediately changed when they saw this firework. This signal didn't just signify danger, it meant that voluminous amounts of enemies were about to invade the city. How could that be? Shrek Academy was located within the Doluo continent's core regions, and the academy had very good relationships with all three empires. Where did these enemies come from? Even if it was the body sect attacking them, they wouldn't suddenly launch an invasion against Shrek Academy at a time when the Sun Moon Empire posed a great threat to everyone. Shrek Academy had always been fair to everyone, but they were an academy, after all. They accepted talents and prodigies from all over the world, and they produced similar talents. They weren't like sects, who would only nurture and develop their own strength. For as long as Bei Bei could remember, this was the first time that Shrek Academy had released an emergency signal such as this one. What is happening? Bei Bei could hear that Elder Xian's voice was stable, but there was a thread of anxiety and worry amidst that steadiness. What did the sudden change in the sky bring? What do we do, Bei Bei? Shu Sansha asked Bei Bei. Everyone's eyes turned towards Bei Bei, and he lowered his voice as he said, "Get on the southern city wall, everyone. Nana, you will remain, and when Teacher Xian comes out, kindly ask him to lead our brethren from the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall to transport the soul tools that we have crafted and stockpiled to the southern city wall. Be quick." Yes, Nana nodded hurriedly. Bei Bei waved his hand and immediately led the Tang sect's members towards the southern city wall. At Shrek Academy's southern city wall. Ever since Shrek City was established, the highest part of the city wall and the strongest and most meticulous defenses across the entire city had always been on the southern side of the city. The reason was simple, this direction was facing the Great Star Doe Forest. Ever since the Great Star Doe Forest's uprising, the southern city wall had been further fortified. The southern city wall was 1,500 feet tall and 200 feet wide. It stretched across more than 5 kilometers, and it could accommodate more than 10,000 people to fight on its walls at the same time. Shrek City's army was more or less connected to Shrek Academy. Shrek City didn't have a lord, the city's defense fell to Shrek Academy's Sea Gods Pavilion. Almost every city defense officer was a powerful individual who had graduated from Shrek Academy. If someone had to choose a city across the continent with the highest concentration of soul masters, Shrek City would undoubtedly take the top spot. The soul engineers in the Sun Moon Empire's Radiant City could also be called soul masters, but Radiant City was densely populated, and their soul engineer to citizen ratio couldn't compare to the density of soul masters in Shrek City. Shrek City's current chief defense officer was named Shishing. He was a tall middle-aged man, looking a little more than 40 years old. He had a square and flat face, big eyes, and thick eyebrows. He had a muscular frame, and he gave others a towering and imposing feeling with his mere presence. He was 48 years of age, and could be said to be in the prime of his life. When he was studying at Shrek Academy, he had once had a nickname, the Time Magician. Afterwards, when he became a titled Doluo, his title was Time, the Time Doluo, Shishing. 3 years ago, the previous chief defense officer had resigned and returned to Shrek Academy's inner courtyard to enjoy his retirement, and Shishing had become Shrek City's chief defense officer with a unanimous vote from the Sea Gods Pavilion. He was responsible for everything that had to do with the city's defenses. Their city defense officer was actually a titled Doluo. Possibly only Shrek City could afford to have such a luxurious arrangement. At this moment, the Time Doluo, Shishing, was standing on the city wall and gazing far into the distance with a door look on his face. More accurately, he was staring to the south. This video will end here.